What's going on?
Hey,
Welcome back.
Mike.
Welcome back to the What Are You Made Of podcast. I have Carolyn Flower with me today. Carolyn, I'm going to let her get into what she does, but Carolyn is a friend of mine. I met her in the mentor group, the Cardone 10X mentor group, and she actually is now helping me with the What Are You Made Of book that's going to be coming out. And I'm glad to have her on the show today. But before I do that, let me thank my sponsor, Nations Lending, Home Loans Made Human. Doing home loans, residential home loans throughout the United States and all 50 states. NMLS, mine is N161487 in case compliance is listening. Cover my butt there. But anyway, I'm excited to have Carolyn on today because she has guided me and helped me so much, and I want her to share what she can do for you as well as the listeners. My big thing with the What Are You Made Of movement is getting your story out and sharing with people and inspiring people with your story and not being embarrassed by your story or not thinking that your story is ordinary or people wouldn't care about it. It's big for me. That's a big topic. And so Carolyn aligns very well with the What Are You Made Of movement and the podcast. So I wanted to bring her on. And Carolyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mike. Love being here with you today. Love what you're doing. And I feel pretty honored to be part of this leg of your journey. So thanks for that.
Well, and Carolyn, appreciate having you. So before you get into what you're made of, tell the audience what you do and the name of your company.
So Carolyn Flower International has been a company for 27 years. And 6 years ago, I developed a literary division to the company. I was writing my first book, and I realized there was really not a lot of different places to go to get all the answers to those questions. So I found this kind of major gap in the industry. So I created a way for my fellow writers, aspiring emerging authors to write books, but to have it completely guided by a team. So that's really where I started focusing my attention. My business has always been about PR and promotion, but really it's always been about helping people tell their story, right? So whether or not it was a company I was promoting, a theater, a professional opening, a business launch, whatever the case may be, I was always really helping people tell their stories. And so now I just do it through the vehicle of a book and helping people write books that matter, because your stories are extraordinary, and I help build belief in people so that they understand the significance of the story.
And by the way, she is a best-selling author, so I just want to throw that out there. I know you don't want to toot your own horn, maybe, but she's a best-selling author. But listen, let's go back a ways, and let me hear what you're made of. Let me hear about some things that you went through as maybe as a younger individual, and something that's shaped you today.
Well, I'll tell you. I was doing a radio interview. My book is about gratitude, and I was doing a radio interview a couple of years back, and on air live, they asked me when I started writing gratitude, and I really had no idea until that moment. And those words came out of my mouth. And I said, as a really young kid, I was struggling with living with a parent with mental illness. I didn't know that at the time. I just knew that things were not good, and I didn't have siblings. So it was really my father looking after my mother, and I was kind of like looking after myself. And so I was recounting to them when I started writing gratitude. I love my room. I love my friends. I love my record player back then. I love all these things. And I realized, oh my gosh, I was so focused on what I wanted to be good about my life as the complete contrast to what I was living. And the funny thing is, I really don't tell this story. And I think I always felt, because my father protected my mom, I always felt like that's what I needed to do. But as a kid, writing became my strategy to cope, because I never knew what kind of day I was going to have. And I always feel like I need to say this disclaimer of, well, I don't want to disparage my mom. And my mother passed away a year ago. And when my father died in 2012, that's when I really got to writing this book, because I inherited my mom. And it seemed kind of, I knew that this was the way things were supposed to roll out, because I didn't have a relationship with my mom. But when my father died, I was the only one left to look after her. And I did that for 7 years. And only once he died, and I knew that this part of my story needed mending and healing, only then did I understand that she had been mentally ill. And I was in my 50s, like I'm 56 now. So imagine, I spent my whole life thinking that I was kind of broken, because that's how she really kind of made the childhood. So when I was a kid, I would write to say, no, I'm okay. I'm okay, because I never felt okay. And then I put myself into theater when I was 10 because I wanted to be myself. So I didn't go into theater to play some role. I went into theater on my own, and it was terrifying, by the way, to go into an audition when you're 10 years old, right? And I went into an audition, and then theater became my family. It's how I grew up in the arts. And so instead of going into theater to say, I want to play this role and be someone else, I just wanted to go into theater so I could be me, because
Right.
I couldn't be me at home. So I spent so much time in theater and the arts and writing and crafting and creating that became who I was and how I could help other people with their stories as I started to kind of mend my own. So I think
And so,
resilience is something that has come up in my vocabulary many, many times. It's like, listen, when you understand that there's something that's just not right, you get to choose, right, how you're going to respond to that. And you can react to it. You can go down a lot of different paths. But I'm really grateful that I chose the creative arts as a way of creating a family that was supportive and loving and facing fears all the time. And so I learned what really I was made of, because I used to say to myself, if I can stand up and sing, it was all musical theater. If I can stand up and sing in front of 1,000 people, I can do anything.
right.
Like nothing scared me after that.
Yeah. A couple points right there. When you said something about your mother was struggling with mental illness and your dad had to take care of her, it kind of reminds me of my mom's mother, who did commit suicide. I guess my college years, I mentioned before on a podcast, but nonetheless, her husband stuck with her all those years that she was struggling with mental illness. And I always looked at and watched the toll that it took on him, and
Oh
how
yeah.
hard he worked at his business, and then how money was like blown. Like he really, like, by the time my grandfather passed away and retired and all that, he lived in a single wide trailer. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but he had worked and built a business big enough to have several houses.
Right.
And the mental illness of my grandmother pulled that from him. And
Mm.
so when you say that, not just the time and effort and the mental capacity that he had to put into that, but the monetary part of it, and what was sacrificed because of it, is just the people. I think that's something that's overlooked a lot of times.
Well, I think in some stories, I would especially identify it to mine. My father had my parents. When my father passed away, he passed away in his sleep because he deserved it, right? He deserved that. And when he passed away, I really had understood what for better for worse meant. I mean, my father and mother were married 54 years, and he took care of that woman every blessed day of her life. And I didn't understand her mental illness until I did. And I write about it actually in the book, because the second chapter of my book is about that day when I get that call, where she's found him, and what happened after that. And this is where I found this deep sense of gratitude. I mean, I had to take time off from my practice for a year to look after her. She had dementia. She had just about every illness you could possibly imagine. But I also knew in that moment that he was passing this baton to me, and it was now I had to look after a woman who never looked after me. So let me tell you something. Like, you have to dig deep, because you have to get through the emotion, a whole bunch of negative emotions about that. So that's where the Gratitude Project 365 came from, which happened the year before I wrote my book. I said, okay, I'm going to write gratitude every single day for a year. I want to see how it changes me, because I don't want to focus on all the things that are wrong with this situation. I want to focus on what's right. And when
Right.
I chose to do that, I understood all the blessed gratitude that was around me, even in parts of my life that were really, really very challenging. So what it did is it transformed the way I thought of my mother today, and it gave me this tremendous amount of compassion for what she must have been living then that I didn't I was too young, I didn't understand. But I was no longer angry at her. I no longer felt like she didn't give me, she was not capable. So, you know, when you really focus on the good, when you really focus on the blessings that come up, even in chaotic situations, it really does transform how you think, how you feel, and how you behave. So I knew that in the 7 years that I had with her until she passed away a year ago, by the time she passed away, like none of this youngster stuff is, it doesn't impact me in the way that it did my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, and by the way, the book that she is mentioning is called Gravitate Toward, actually Gravitate, the number 2, Gratitude, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just to be clear, and that'll be in the show notes, guys, along with Carolyn's bio. She is a great background, and her expertise, guys, I'm valuing this. Me, every time I talk to her, I steal stuff from her. I try to keep her on the call or the phone as long as possible. But I shouldn't have said that in front of you. I'm sorry. But no, she's full of knowledge. And, you know, it's amazing. I'm 43 right now, and it's amazing how much I don't know. And I really, over the last year and a half to 2 years, have become a sponge and stopped. I got my ego out of the way and stopped thinking I know everything, and started learning and absorbing. And all of a sudden I'm seeing this transformation in myself. That I wish I would have, you know, I look back and, man, I wasted 20 some years not being a sponge. No. But I get it. I get that I came to where I am now because of these years, but I look back and I don't have resentment. I'm not going to sit and dwell on it. But the fact of the matter is, I want to get this out to the audience, because if you're listening to this and you're younger than me at 43, I want you to take this advice. Stop thinking you know everything. Get your ego out of the way and become a sponge and learn as much as possible.
Yeah,
and it'll transform you.
You have to be teachable. And so when I created the platform, a publishing platform, I understood that I was going to receive people that were not teachable. Right. So it applies to every business, but it does apply to mine. So when I build belief in people, my story goes back to when I was a kid living that life, and doing all that writing and writing poetry to get all those emotions out of me, because I didn't have a mom I could go and sit on her lap and go, hey mom, I really need your guidance. Like I have 3 kids. My youngest is my daughter. I have 2 sons and a daughter, and she's 21 now. And I mean, we talk about everything. So I didn't have that. I didn't have a mom I could go to for wisdom. We didn't have that kind of relationship. So I kind of would write the stuff that would come out of my head. And I used to think it was pretty magical, because I would look at my notes and go, oh, that's what that's about. So writing became like this way for me to express everything and feel genuine and understand that I was working through stuff. So when I was in grade 4, when I was 9, I was doing all this writing, and I had this teacher when I was in grade 4. Her name was Mrs. Gold, and she used to encourage me to bring in all of my poems. And we developed this relationship, young student to teacher. And she used to ask me to stay after school pretty often. She'd say, bring me the stuff you're writing, you know? Then she used to ask me to write it on Bristleboard. Okay. It's like before iPhones and stuff. And she used to post these poems of mine all over the classroom. I thought I was an author when I was 9. I thought I was published when I was 9. She built the belief in me so strong that I had talent, that I could write, that I was expressive, that I could impact people with my words when I was 9. So she set my stage. She set my life up. She set up my career. So here's a really fun part of my story, which I love to tell, because it just gives Mrs. Gold some sunshine. When I published my book in 2015, I had not written it, and I was going to study at the Chopra Center. And I wanted to give Deepak Chopra, because he was a mentor of mine, I wanted to give him a real good sense of gratitude. So I said, I'm going to write this book, and I'm going to have it published, and I'm going to write a note to him and hand it to him. That's what I wanted to do. And before I left for California to go study at the Chopra Center, I had written in my book, in the dedication, I had not talked to Mrs. Gold for 42 years. I had tried to find her, couldn't find her. She wasn't on Facebook anywhere. I mean, the years had gone on, and now she's in her 70s. So the night before I go to California, I'm having a dinner with a friend, and she says that she knows somebody who knows somebody. Anyway, long story short, I get an email from Mrs. Gold 42 years later. And the next day she says, oh my gosh, I hear you've written a book. So-and-so and so-and-so told me I should email you. So I said, oh my gosh, I said, I can't believe I'm talking to you. I've been looking for you for years. I said, I've even put a dedication to you in the book. And I said, I'm going to California because I'm going to study at the Chopra Center, but I'm going to promote the book up the coast. She goes, oh, that's funny. Well, I live in Vancouver now. And she says, my husband and I go for our anniversary every year. It's our 30th this year. And we're going to San Francisco for our 30th wedding anniversary. I said, well, when are you going to San Francisco? She says, I'll be there on the 27th of June. I said, me too.
Wow.
Where are you staying? She says, Fisherman's Wharf. I said, me too.
Get out of here. That's crazy, man.
So I go to California, I publish the book, I hand a copy to Deepak Chopra, and on my way back, I meet Mrs. Gold after 42 years, and I hand her the second copy of my book, and she cries. Why? Because I say, you are the reason that I write. So my business now is dedicated to you, and I will build belief in every single author who comes to me. Because what you did for me, I will do for everybody. It changed my life.
That's a legacy. That's what the legacy is all about.
But you know what's so beautiful? She had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
She had no idea. Oh dear, what are you talking about? I said, no, you have no idea. You changed my life. You changed the trajectory. You took a young girl who had no support, who had her theater kind of her orbit of her theater friends and wanted at 9, 10 years old. And what was coming out of me, which was my story, so important, my story. I didn't know that, but she did. So now, every time I meet with a client, every time I meet with an aspiring or an emerging author, I can see their story from 40,000 feet, and it is my mission to tell every single one of them. And more importantly, to build belief in you that it matters.
Yep.
That's the basis of my entire business practice. From one woman who did that for me.
Yeah, I mean, really, if you're into creating as much value as a person when you wake up in the morning, the amount of people that you can impact, and then the amount of people that those people can impact is exponential. And if you can really wrap your head around the fact that if you help one person, you're really helping who knows how many. And when you decide to make a decision whether you should help someone or whether you should offer some assistance to someone, that should run through your head that it's an exponential thing. It's not just a one task that you're doing for someone.
It's never that. You're sparking a flame. You're sparking something inside them. Yeah. And you never know when you're going to inspire a person. We've all been in those situations where we're sitting in a car listening to a song, or we're sitting in a, maybe in a seminar, or we're listening to a podcast, and all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, that's so profound for me. That is going to change the way I do this. But I can guarantee every single writer who becomes an author, you will change the life of another human being. That is my personal guarantee.
Yep.
It can't not happen, because if it comes to you, if that idea comes to you that says, I want to write a book. No, everyone says I should write a book. Nah, who's going to care? It's not going to matter. Who am I to write a book? I'm not a good writer. All of those limiting beliefs that are going to come to you, I know what all of those are. I've seen them all. So I help navigate that journey so that you actually complete this dream that you have of changing lives of other people through writing a book that matters.
Now you say that profound thing when like I've listened to the Red Hot Chili Peppers songs over and over again, like growing up, right? And I was in the shower the other day and I had the Alexa on playing some Red Hot Chili Peppers, and there was I can't remember the line right now. I was trying to think as you were saying that, but there was a line that stuck out to me, and I'm like, holy cow, I never heard of that way before.
Right.
I mean, that was unreal. And you know what? I'm gonna put it on Facebook when I figure it out. I'm gonna post it. Because it was really good. But anyway, that goes to that point. But let me ask you a question. Yeah. So speak on this right here. People have stories. One, they're embarrassed about. Two, they're worried about offending somebody in their family. If it has to do, like you talked about your mother. I talk about my dad. Yeah. Like I said, Pete Vargas talks about his dad. But talk about that, like that roadblock that a lot of people have of being able to write a book that could be sell millions of copies. Mm-hmm. And inspire and help people from things that, like, let's say a parent wasn't the best parent, and for whatever reason, that they're not bad people, they just weren't the best. And getting over that hurdle. Talk about that.
So the first thing that you want to do is you want to take, and you and I have talked about this with all my clients. I call it the brain dump phase, right? So you got all this stuff in your head or in your notebooks or journals or in your computer or wherever it all is, and it's fragmented and it's all over the place, or it isn't, or maybe it's just an idea that you're incubating about a book. But everyone jumps forward and takes the how can I limit myself and resist doing this? So the fear is going to pop in first. So how do you eliminate that? You say to yourself, I'm going to write a manuscript that no one's going to read. Okay. I'm just going to take everything that I have about this idea and I'm going to put it into Google Drive, Evernote, Google Doc, Word Doc, wherever you want to house it. But you want to dump all the stuff out like a jigsaw puzzle on a big table of 1,000 pieces. And all you want to do is search for that first group of pieces with the edge, the frame, right? You frame that. You don't worry about putting all the pieces in your jigsaw puzzle. You just worry about getting that frame done. That's where we start, okay? And then all those various pieces are like all the ideas. And you and I did this together. It's like, okay, what are all the things that have got to go in here? And then when you get to those areas that may be a little bit sensitive for you, you may even find it difficult to write them. Or as you're writing them and going back into your past, you're starting to feel those emotions again. And that may also come in your way and hold you back. And a lot of people don't write the book because they don't know how to navigate through that. So they figure, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. And they just forget about the book. My job is to move you through all of those emotions that are going to come up when you write this. So this is not a straight line. When you're writing a book, you're transforming self. That's the first part that's actually happening. The writing of the book is not about putting a bunch of words on paper. When you become the next version of yourself, which is what you're called to do when you're called to write a book, because you're going to take that journey before your reader does, you want to dump all that content and not judge it, not edit it, not do anything with it. As a matter of fact, you want to put as much as you can in there and just say, no one's going to read this until I decide that it sounds right. Because what you do is you open up that creativity and you take away the resistance. So now you're writing everything, but nobody's going to read it. As we create this work of art, we start deciding how to handle each one of those pockets, those chapters, those areas that are a little bit more sensitive. And that's what editors are for as well. We would never allow you to put out a book that would disparage somebody, because legally, first of all, morally, you would not do that. And legally, you can't. So you want to make sure that there's nothing in there that's going to be untoward to anyone. But to write it as if no one's going to read it allows you to at least get it out of you. And then we can fix it. We can fine tune it afterwards. And that's kind of the first roadblock that a lot of people feel that they face, and they call it writer's block. It's not writer's block. It's just resistance, because it's vulnerability. You're taking a piece of your life, like the story about my mother, which is not in my book. It was a day about my father, but I've always resisted telling that story. And at a certain point in time, it became obvious that this is a big part of who I am and how I've walked through the journey of my life. So it's not to disparage her in any way. As a matter of fact, the way that I grew up was a gift, because had I not had a mother and a father in that particular way, I would not be totally autonomous the way I am. I would not have the self-confidence that I have. I would be maybe a lot more fearful than I am. And fear for me is just like, I just feel that fear and do it anyway. But maybe I wouldn't have done that had I not got up in a stage and sung in front of 1,000 people. And I only did that because of the way I grew up. Mm-hmm. So our stories matter.
Yeah. And speaking of singing in front of 1,000 people, like when I was growing up at a young age, I would be in a lot of awkward situations, whether it was in court situations, child psychologist to see if I was mature enough to figure out where I wanted to live. Running into people after certain events happen, after, real awkward. So as I got older, I always say to myself, like, I use this, what are you made of? Like, what are you made of? Dude, you've been through this stuff before. It's just like nothing compared to what you went through before. And then I can just handle things, where I see other people struggling in those same things at 40 years old or 30 years old or whatever it is. Even dealing with prospects or customers in a business, they're afraid. They shy away from tough conversations, awkward situations. For me, it's like, I've been here, man. I got this. Like, get out of my way.
Well,
Um,
and you
yeah,
understand that. And part of what you do with this, what are you made of, is you're bringing awareness to people and you're asking them to go back into those past situations and actually uncover how much power they have.
yeah,
Because where you can identify that, and to a certain degree, I do that too, it's like your story matters. And there's so much of your life that has been successful that you just don't give yourself credit for.
yeah.
So when you're having these challenges trying to, maybe grow your business and to talk to more customers, and you're telling yourself that same old story over and over again, you want to get them to go back and focus on all the success stories they've already had, so that
Right,
they can
right.
find that one thing like I have that says I can do this because I did all that.
Well, what is the cause of that? Why do people hamper things down and push things down that can lift them up? You know, do you
Because I
think it
think
has
we're
to
just
do with like a
wired. I just think as a society, we're wired to, and look at the news cycle. We're wired for catastrophic thinking. We're wired to think of what went wrong before of what goes right. I mean, when I was a kid, I just thought of this. When I was a kid and I would get 95, let's say a really good subject, I'd get 95, right? And I'd go home and I'd say, I got 95. And my mother would say, but you didn't get 100. What did you get wrong in that 5? Now, I get that that's important because you want to know, okay, I didn't get 100, but I got 95. Like, so you don't always want to focus on what you didn't do. You want to focus on the 95% that you did.
yeah? So and then there would be some kids that say, "Oh, you're a nerd." You know, the ones that it started back then. I thought about this. Like, there's some kids that were struggling in school, and the way they would make themselves feel better is the people that got good grades or did well on tests or something. They would bust their chops,
Yeah.
and then try to pull them back down or justify that. Oh, I didn't want to be smart anyway. I didn't want to get a good grade on that test anyway. And then as you get older into the real world, that's continues whether
Yeah.
you're trying to be successful in business or have an idea or whatever the case is, you have those people. So what about this though? Like they have, you mentioned something with the test. I was going to say something about that. Shoot, I forget what it was now. Anyway, so if you're writing a book,
Yeah.
and here's something that I run into, and again, I'm transparent. I share my journey because the journey is invisible for successful people a lot of
Yeah.
times. But when you're writing and you think, I don't know if that's going to read well, or if people aren't going to like or think that I'm a good writer if I'm writing like that. When the editor goes through it, does the editor look and say, hey, here's a better way to say this so it's going to sound better? Or do they just look for grammatical things or?
Oh, no, no, no. The editing comes in a lot of different, like there's no one edit is the same. So what we do is I will work with an author. Some authors come to me, they've already got their manuscript, it's finished. They have a professional editor, it's been done, and they come to me for those phases because I'm not going to have you do stuff you don't need. So if you come with an edited manuscript, we will definitely evaluate that. So when you come in without one, we develop that over time. So we're working together on that to bring it to that level of like a really solid first draft. And then what I do is I bring in an editor to evaluate that manuscript. So as you can imagine, not everybody writes the same way. And a lot of us as writers make very common, errors. We write in the first person and switch to the third person. We repeat things a lot. We have expressions we don't realize we use over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So when an editor looks at a manuscript, they're going to evaluate as a whole, what kind of edit does this piece of work need? Does it need just a line edit? Does it need a copy edit? Does it need a full architecture? Does it need, grammatically, that's all part of it, all of the punctuation, grammar and all that. But does it need more than that? Does it really need some moving about and structure and things like that? So once we establish what kind of edit it needs, and they give us written feedback as to, okay, this is great, we need some work here, not understanding this so much, then I pair editor with author, and then the two of you build on this, and they give you suggestions. You go back and rewrite some stuff, and then we go back and forth a few times until we have a manuscript that is in its final version.
And then
So
do they even take it to the extreme where they'll have, like, some people just don't want to do it, right? As far as the writing, once it gets to the editor and they say, hey, can you guys handle writing this part?
yeah, that's a ghostwrite.
But can you have a partial ghostwriter?
Yes, that's
Okay.
developmental editing. So I have that as well. As my editors will work with you on, okay, this is all you've had now, and then we just bundle it up in groups of time, because you don't necessarily need 10 hours, or you don't necessarily need 20 hours. If the editor comes back and says, can you go do this and this, and you actually do that, because
Right.
not everyone does what they're
Yep.
asked to do, and you work together, because that's a relationship. But everything that I do at Oxygen, which is the footprint, the publishing footprint of Carolyn Flower is Oxygen Publishing, that has an entire team of people. I've got everybody who does anything that's required for books. So whether it's an illustrator, or content for blogs, or editors, or ghostwriters, and all those people. This is a human experience, because writing a book is a very emotional human experience. So it's not like an assembly line. You're going to actually work with an editor, and you're going to build a relationship with that one person. And then when you get to the design, you're going to have a relationship with that one person, and they are going to take your vision of what you want, and they're going to develop that vision until we get it out into the big, big world and we publish it. And then let me tell you, the book now takes on a life of its own.
It really does. I mean, that's something that I've noticed, is that it comes alive, and it has a pulse and a heartbeat, and then when you go back to it, it's sitting there staring at you, waiting for you, and it talks to you. It's just crazy phenomenon.
So we did a cover review, where you're going to be doing a little sneak peek cover reveal for you. And what's so much fun is when that proof, after we've done all of those things, and we get you that physical first look at that book, and it comes in that envelope, and you open it up, and you actually hold on to your book for the first time, and your name's staring back at you. That's an unbelievable experience.
Right. Yeah. Because, I mean, it's
a work of art. This is everything that was in you that is now out. And authors also feel this kind of resistance again, where they go, oh, this is really real now, and it's going to sell, and people are actually going to read me. And how's that going to feel? So when you get that first review, or when somebody reads your book and goes, oh my gosh, Mike, I wish you had written this 5 years ago, because you have no idea how much this has impacted my life today. There's nothing better than that.
Right.
Because you know that you've done what you set out to do.
No, and it's similar to the podcast. It's similar to the podcast. I mean, I can't tell you how many, I don't know if I did the podcast really to get some of the feedback that I'm getting, but it's just like, it's crazy, the impact. And I honestly, like, really blown away about how many people that I'm reaching, how far the reach is, the type of inspiration that's been coming, and some of the stuff that people bring back to me information wise of how it's impacted them, or the type of inspiration that they're receiving from it. I had no anticipation of. I really,
How can you? I mean, I was at a book signing that I did. I often do, because it's a book about gratitude. They often have me at, like, here in Montreal at Indigo chapters. It's like Barnes and Noble, and they have you in, and it's usually the beginning of the year. And when everyone thinks that that's the time that you have to start, being grateful. And I'd go in, I'd do these book signings, and I had this girl come in, and she had been given a copy of my book by her mom for her for Christmas. So it was only a few weeks later, and I was there, I think, mid-January. And she came in and she said, I have your book. So she wasn't buying it there, which is cool. The best part of book signings is talking to your readers, right? And she comes in with the book, and she says, my mom gave me your book. I didn't want it. She gave me your book because she says I needed it. I said, okay. So she says, but I brought it because I want to show you something. So she takes a copy of my book, and there's pages to write gratitude in there. And she says, I was really super angry, and I went through something, catastrophic, and my mother gave me this book, said, this will help you. So she says, I started writing in your book, and I didn't want to write in your book, and I decided I was going to write in red pen, because she says, I was so angry that I had to write in this damn book. So she shows me, and she starts flipping through the pages of my book, and she says, look at what color I write in now. She says, now I write in pink and green. And she says, I am so calm now because this book taught me how. I mean, I stood at my own book signing with tears running down my face, because I said, oh my gosh, thank you so much for being so kind to share that, because now I understand that I touched somebody with that book. She didn't have to tell me that, but she did. So those are things you're going to learn, and those are things that are going to happen to you. And I know this. So because I know it, I want you to feel that.
And by the way, this is the book, just so everybody knows, you can see it. I have a copy in mine. This actually has some writing inside of it as well. It's signed. So yeah. I'm going to be hammering through this one here shortly. And I have it right over here. But So guys, if you want to get this book, check it out. It's Gravitate, the number 2, Gravitate to Gratitude, Journal Your Journey. And
Begin within.
Begin within, it says as well. Yeah. So
where it all starts.
So yeah, listen, the other part I want to talk to you about, and we'll finish with this.
Yeah.
When you have the book part of it, talking about how to monetize that and how to break it into a business actually, or help a business.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
So your book, the language that we use is books, brand, and business, because they're all interconnected. Now that, there are some authors, we've done memoirs for different ages of people, and they just want to write the memoir. They don't want to build anything with it. It was just a dream. It was on their bucket list. They wanted to write a book. But the majority of people that we help write books are people that have a real desire to be of service. And so they've either come in with no brand in business, but they start with that book and go, I want to build it up from here and use the book as a foundation. Or they already have a great brand in business, like you've already got a brand you're building. You're kind of doing everything simultaneously in your particular situation. You're doing it all at once. You've got the brand, you're creating the business, and the book are all coming up to meet everything all at one time, which is, it's rare, but you're doing most of it.
And by the way, not to cut you off, but I started with our mortgage group that we have with this home loans that we do with Nations Lending, thinking about how can I get known? It's not about like getting known locally. I want to get known in our local market. I was like, you know what? This is thinking too small. I got to start going global.
Absolutely.
With trying to get known and obsessed every morning with this. Like, how can I do this? So I started implementing different things. And Nations Lending has been awesome, by the way. The thought behind them, they see the big picture. They understand that you can brand nations, and we do.
Yeah.
But also, if you brand an individual and support and lift up a person that can funnel loans into the company and customers into the company, that's where this all started, by the way. So I just wanted to, I want to clarify that and let everybody know that you can do that in other businesses.
That's exactly. And here's the thing, from my PR promotion background, you are the brand. Okay, so what are you made of is a part of your brand, and Nations is a part of your brand, but you are the brand. So every time you step out, you are representing yourself and whatever brands that you have, whatever business you have. That's why becoming an author versus, or I call it kind of the gateway to writing the book. A lot of the work that I do with people is teaching them how to become that author. What does that mean? How do you show up in the world? Because if you're claiming that you want to be an author and you want to be a leader, and as an author, you're an authority, that's what you are, you're already a leader. But then on your Facebook page, you're behaving like somebody who is not a leader. That's going to be like cross purposes to you. That's not in alignment with your brand. So you have to decide, who am I? Who am I showing up as in the world? So we do a lot of that. So you come in and you say, I have a book. Now I want to create a brand and a business around it. We make all of those pieces work. So if you want to go into knowledge commerce, if you want to create course content, you want to go into coaching or consulting, or you want to build an empire with your content, we just make sure that the book, the brand, the business all work in tandem together. That doesn't mean you have to have a business or a brand to write a book, but a lot of the time when you're inspired to write the book, it's the seed that you start writing the book, and then as you're writing it, you're going, I can help people with this. I got to create a brand. I got to create a business. And that's how you monetize books. Yes, you can sell books. Yes, you can earn an income, a passive income with book sales and all of that. And I'm never one who's going to say that's the low hanging fruit. It's not, because J.K. Rowling didn't know, right?
I mean, you got to kind of have some luck on your side in regards to book sales.
Well, you
making
have to make
a ton of money with book
about
sales.
what you want to do with this book, like how do you want to position it in the marketplace? So yeah, you got to have an idea of what you want to do with it. But for the most part, people that, if you look at the Stephen Coveys of the world, if you look at, the Tony Robbins of the world, they're combining their books, and the Grant Cardones, they're combining their books, their knowledge, their expertise, their wisdom, their imagination with all the other components that are going to lift the entire thing off the ground. So that's why a book can be so powerful, because when you tell people in a circumstance, let's say you give a talk somewhere, or you're having a conversation at a cocktail party with somebody, and you're telling them about what you do, and you're telling them about how you serve people, that person is going to go communicate that to somebody else and could pretty much completely annihilate what you just said. because they don't understand it, and you haven't been able to leave them with something. So when you create a book, you're actually duplicating yourself. So when you finish having a talk and say, hey, listen, I have a copy of my book. I mean, you don't even have to sell them a copy of your book. Say, listen, I really would like to get back to you. Here's a copy of my book. It gives you a little bit more information about how I can be of service to you. Take a copy of my book as my gift to you, and I'd love to get back to you and talk to you. And that book now tells them exactly what you want them to know.
Right.
Over
Right.
and over and over again.
Right. Well, listen, so Carolyn, thank you so much for being on the show. The
Thank
content
you.
that you provide is invaluable. And how can the audience get in touch with you and engage with you further?
Best way is to go to my website, carolynflower.com. You can find me on Facebook under that name. You can find me Carolyn Flower International on Facebook, and you can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn, Carolyn Flower.
And do not put an S on the end of the flower. It's not flowers, it's flower.
It's one flower, and the kind that blooms, not the kind you cook with.
There you go. There you go. Yes, OWER.
Yes, flower.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Carolyn. I appreciate you, and you are, part of my family now, as far as I'm concerned, and I appreciate you so much. So
you're part of ours too, and we love what we're doing with WAYMO, and love what you're doing and how you're expanding and your crew and everything. And I would just encourage everybody to get with Mike. Listen to his podcast. Listen to what he has to say. He's taking what he has in his heart and bringing it out into the world, and nothing can be more valuable than that. And I bring that every time I see somebody who has a heart-centered business, and I identify with that so much. I think back to my own story. It goes back to Mrs. Gold. She didn't do anything with any intention of gaining. She was just giving. And if we do that, you can never go wrong.
And guys, by the way, too, I told Carolyn, and I told the people that handle some of my social media stuff, or any vendors or people that I work with or advisors or anything, this is something that can add fuel to your fire. If you approach it, you pay them to do a job, right?
Yeah.
But if you approach it to make them look good, because you're going to put in the work and effort too. And when I wake up every morning with my movement's got to be successful to impact, inspire people, but also for all the people that were involved with it, my team, I call it, to raise them up as well. That can add fuel to your fire and to your movement. So that's a little piece of advice for you listeners that are starting a movement or starting a business. And, but listen, guys, I want you to go subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast platforms. And also hit the YouTube channel, Mike C-Roc Ciorrocco. Subscribe there. Please share with your friends, family, coworkers. Help this movement keep going, because it doesn't go anywhere with just one maniac, one obsessed person.
And by the same token, if you go to carolynflower.com, I give free consults. Right at the top, you'll see schedule a consult. It's just information. I can spark your little inner author voice and give you a little bit more information. If I can do that for you, it's my absolute pleasure. Just click on that link, go and schedule a call, and I will see you and your inner author somewhere.
And we will put all that in the show notes, and make sure you guys listeners, we support our guests here. I'm not going to bring a guest on here that's not going to bring value to you and take great care of you. So please go support Carolyn and her team. And until next time, guys, it's your boy C-Roc. Thank you to Nations Lending, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you for being a part of the What Are You Made Of podcast. So that you don't miss future episodes, please rate and subscribe to the What Are You Made Of podcast on your favorite listening or viewing apps, and follow me on your favorite social media platforms. I would love to hear your stories of past experiences and engage with you further.